welcome to Tea and Strumpets, a Regency romance review. I'm Zoe.
And I'm Kelsey.
And Kelsey, today we are in December. This whole year has passed us by.
Oh my God, it's been a wild year.
Yes.
Where I was at the beginning of the year and where I am at the end of the year is vastly different. But I will say, I was very happy with this year. I made some very big life choices, and I'm very happy with them.
I'm so glad to hear that. I also had some big life events. I have another kid now. I'm pretty happy with her.
That's good. I'd hope so.
And I'm looking forward to next year for sure. I think there's some big changes on my horizon. We have to figure out if I'm going back to work or where and what that looks like and when. And how. But today we're here to talk about books, which is a much better topic of conversation.
Yes. I mean, we can talk about life choices and what we're going to do. Like, I think next year is going to be another big year for me as well. But you know what? That's fine. We're going to talk about books
today. Yes. So we haven't done this before. We haven't talked about just our general favorites in the past, which I think that we kind of missed out doing, because how fun is it to talk about all the great stuff that we have read, listened to, discovered. So that's what we are going to do. And we've got a few categories. These aren't just historical romance books, but just in general, the books that we thought were worth mentioning. So here they are. Our favorite books of 2022.
Okay, so we've broken this down into categories to make it easier, because otherwise Zoe and I will just start naming books off the top of our head, and there'll be no rhyme or reason to them, and no one will understand why we've chosen them. So our favorite book read of the podcast is number 1.
Yes. All right, Kelsey, what was your favorite book that we read for the podcast?
So I want to say A Caribbean Heiress in Paris. However, technically we did not read that for the podcast. We read it in prep for talking with Adriana Herrera.
I think it's fair. I think it's totally fair. It is you read that book for the podcast.
There you go. So that's my pick. If we did one that we did an episode on, I would say A Lady for a Duke.
All right. So then what's your pitch to get somebody else to read A Caribbean Heiress in Paris?
I just think the plot is really unique. I think the characters are really intriguing. I'm like dying to read the next book. I'm dying to read the next book. And I just think it was just so fun and different from what we normally read. Like Adriana said, like late 1800s in Paris was the place to be. And I definitely felt that vibe. Like, I thought like they were strong. I thought it was so unique, the history we got. Like, I love when I actually do get a lot of history in my historical romance. So
awesome.
So Zoe, what was yours?
So my favorite book we read for the podcast is Deception by Amanda Quick, because after reading Deception, I think I read I don't know. I can't remember if I said it was 9 Amanda Quicks or 6 Amanda Quicks. I read a whole bunch of Amanda Quicks, and I found this author that was just fun and silly and a little bit different, but easy to read. And I loved the murder mysteries, or usually there's like a mystery element that they're also trying to solve. They get together pretty quick, and then the rest of the book is a mystery. And I've just been really into, this kind of cop shows or murder mysteries or I recently got into some true crime podcasts, which I'm not sure how long I can live in the true crime zone, but I'm having fun. So Deception, it started me on Amanda Quick, so that it gets the title of favorite for the podcast.
I would say so. That makes a lot of sense. I think that was a really good one, and I was so happy when you're like, I went on a book read.
Yeah. All right. So what was your favorite book this year that you reread?
Okay. So I reread Tessa Dare's Stud Club trilogy. Now, this is not one of Tessa Dare's most auspicious series. It's one of her earlier series, but I just need some Tessa Dare in my life again. And I was really pleasantly surprised by the books and how great Tessa Dare is. And God, I just want the bride bet. Ugh.
I think it might be coming in 2023.
I'm not going to jinx myself. I'm not going to jinx us. I'm just going to fingers crossed and hope and pray.
Yeah. Well, my favorite reread was Thief of Shadows, Maiden Lane, I think it's number 4. Oh my God, Winter Makepeace. He's just such a memorable character. And his, I think he might have been like the first virgin hero I read that like really was just, I don't know, poignant or something. And like the reveal of him being what he is.
Yeah.
Anyhow, it was definitely my favorite reread.
That makes sense because I remember when you were like telling me all about the Maiden Lanes, you were like, oh, it's so good. And I was like, oh, I couldn't do it. And then when we read the first 3 books, we were kind of like, And even you were like, I remember this being so good. And then you got to Winter's book and you're like, this is why.
Seriously. Okay, so our next category is our favorite book by a new author to us.
Okay, so I got swept away by Bookstagram. I finally listened to the peer pressure and I read Court of Thorns and Roses, and I have now I'm like halfway through Crescent City number 2. So I've literally read all of her books now. Like once I finish this, I've read all of her books.
Wow. That's really interesting to me. So I, at your recommendation and my sister's recommendation, I tried to read A Court of Thorns and Roses. I'm like 59% through. I dislike it. I dislike the writing. I just can't get into it. I hear from everybody that book number 2 is better. Listeners, encourage me. I think what I really need to do is also stop reading it on my phone and just get it checked out at the library, because I think having the physical book in my hands will allow me to like skim a little bit to get more to where I want to be and just maybe get into the book a little bit more than reading on my phone, which is my least favorite way to read. So
that's also fair. I did my first, when I got A Court of Thorns and Roses, I got it from the library. Yeah. Like I borrowed it from the library.
So next time I go to the library with my daughter, which is one of my favorite things to do now. It's so cute. She's so excited to go to the library. Okay, anyhow, I will try to actually spend some time in the adult section. It's hard. She's 2.
Yeah. Well, I will say of the other series, like now that I've read more of it, I really am into this Crescent City series. It's much more, it's got a very Shadowhunters vibe. By Cassandra Clare. And because it's modern day technology, but then you get like the fantasy aspect to it. So it's a whole new world, but they've got cell phones and computers and like technology, but the technology is fueled by power from all the different immortal creatures. And there's like, an immortal war going on. My favorite fantasy, this is why I love fantasy. I just love a good battle of good versus evil. It's so funny. 800-page book.
I think that you were saying you also watched Fate the Winx saga on Netflix, which also like sometimes like there's just they're like battling it out, but then they don't even send each other a text. Like they have phones and they can just text each other to be like, yo, going to check out this totally sketch thing. Yeah. See you later. They don't do it. Anyhow, it just makes me laugh. But all right. So now we're on to number 4, which is the book that surprised us. Oh, wait, no. So now I have to talk about my favorite new author.
Yeah, you have to do a new author.
I read 4 new authors this year. I was looking over my list. So those authors were Amanda Quick, Alexis Hall, Kelly Bowen, and Mimi Matthews. And they all had their own prose. And I'm really excited that I read all of them. For me, Amanda Quick was like fun and had the other dimension of the mystery. Kelly Bowen did what I loved really well. We just talked about her in our last episode. Alexis Hall helped me see a new perspective, writing a trans character. I'd never read that, especially in historical romance, really made me think. I'd never read a trans romance. And then Mimi Matthews is I guess the best term is closed door romance. It's not explicit. Like there's not explicit sex written on the page.
Although the second book is closer to much more explicit.
Okay. So it was just like a little bit more PG-13, let's say, romance. And it was kind of like what I was actually more interested in right now, right after having a kid. Like I love reading about people falling in love, but the sex scenes, they're not the thing that makes me like super excited to read the book. That's just where I'm at right now. But I think that the winner for me is A Lady for a Duke and Alexis Hall, because I think that I grew as a person by reading it. And like that is super important for us, even in reading fiction, like that we read things that kind of like challenge us in different ways. And that taught me something, and I really appreciate it.
I would agree with that. I think that A Lady for the Duke, I felt the same way. That's why it was up there as like a potential favorite if we wanted to be specific about podcast episodes. Simply because like I felt that book was probably one of the more profound books that I read this year. Like it wasn't just a romp and a love story. It was I really felt it deep in my soul. Like I read it on like a different emotional level. It made me think at the same time I was reading it. But I was also, sucked into the story, couldn't put it down. So really, really great book.
All right. So now how about a book that surprised you?
Okay, so I will caveat this. So this year was like I had lots of time off. And so like I read much more diversely. I did like the Ripped Bodice bingo, which like really made me like I read a ton of new authors, a ton of books I never would have picked up. But this is a series, and I will say a friend recommended to me, and oh my God, it was so cute. It's called Well Met by Jen DeLuca. It's pretty well known-ish. There's a new one coming out that I just pre-ordered. It's going to be here in a couple days. Yay! And this is a Ren Fair contemporary romance, and I loved it so much. Like,
oh, that's awesome.
It's like it's got Ren Fair, so it's almost fantasy-esque, but not really. But then you get like it's contemporary, but like because they talk about Ren Fair, you still get fun clothing descriptions and like the propriety. Like I just loved the book, and it was very surprising because like I was like, oh, Ren Fair, cool, but again, contemporary is not normally my thing, and yet this year I've read so many more contemporary books and really love it. Anyway,
Yay.
So that was a surprise book because it wasn't one I'd heard about, on the everyone was raving about. It was just a friend said I should read it for a bingo square, and I loved it.
So for me, the book that surprised me, like I wanted to put Amanda Quick, and then I was like, no, I got too many Amanda Quicks on here. So the other book that did really surprise me is Nobody's Princess by Erica Ridley. I expected it to be good. Erica Ridley, sometimes I love her books, and then sometimes I find them a little like long, just and a little bit
draggy.
Yeah, draggy. But I thought this one was great. I loved the characters. I loved their backstory. We have this like made up kingdom where there's just some different things, and I loved it. I was really surprised how much I loved it. I also think like it's really exciting to see a clinch cover in historical romance with two Black characters on the front, and one of them is very dark skinned. You don't see that at all. I really think it's the first one, and it's beautifully done. And I just thought this is what I needed at the time and didn't know it. It's a story of people coming together again, rather than just like a steamy love fest. And Cooney is a badass, and I love the book.
Fantastic. Okay, so now we've talked about our last but not least, our favorite book overall.
What about you, Kelsey?
Okay, so I really loved a lot of the books I read this year. I read so many different ones, and I loved them all for different reasons. But I will say, I'm going to choose this one because even still thinking about it today, I like swoon. I had such a big book hangover, and it wasn't a fantasy book. That I had a book hangover because like all the worlds and all the drama, and I was like, had to get my heart back to normal. I was like, or like it ended on a cliffhanger. This was a sweet romance, and this is another super popular one that's going around the internet right now, and I will back it up 100%. And it's The Love Hypothesis. And I literally just had like the biggest book hangover for it. Like I literally like was thinking about it for days, and I loved it so much. Like, I can't.
Wow. That's wonderful. Maybe I'm going to have to pick that up. So for me, I decided to pick an Amanda Quick book because I read so many. It was the book, the books I read the most of, and I had so much fun with them. And I think my favorite was Ravished by Amanda Quick. And this is a Beauty and the Beast trope.
What?
So yeah, we know that's why Zoe loves it. But yeah, there's just like, it's just a great romp, and I highly recommend it. It's one of the 2 Amanda Quicks that I gave, 5 stars to on Goodreads, and I loved it. I was swept away.
Excellent. Well, that's so much fun. So do you have a question? Do you have a total number of books you've read this year?
I do. Mine's going to be much smaller than yours. Do you? But I made my reading challenge to be 25 books, and I hit that this year because I knew I was having a kid. We also didn't get started until like March of this year reading,
correct.
and I also and doing the podcast. So for me, I was like 25 books. I'll hit it. I've done 31. I think I'll read a couple more this year, but I think you're a little higher than me.
I think I am too. I honestly don't know. I've been trying to update my Goodreads for the first time ever with the books that I've read, but I read at least 25 just over this. I read more than 25 over the summer because I read, I did the book bingo challenge, which I believe there's 25 squares on that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 26. And then I read all of Sarah J. Maas. So that's
okay. You're well over 50. You're well over 50.
And then I read a lot of other books too. So like I would say I'm at least at 50, if not more.
Oh, for sure. Oh, goodness. Well, this was really fun, listeners. If you want to pick up any of the books we talked about today, they will be in our show notes and on our blog at our website, romancepod.com.
Another great book that I read that like was podcast adjacent that I now think everyone should read. I read it. I read the Ladies Wisteria Society or whatever like that. Mm-hmm. Oh my God. And then I read the next book, which is The Witches League or whatever.
The League
like
of Gentlemen and Witches.
Yeah. Oh my God. Zoe, the nonsense level is like a 10.
Fabulous.
And it's like crazy romp, like fantasy adjacent. Like, oh my God. I read the first one and I was like, how have I not picked? I had it on my bookshelf for literally a year. And I didn't read it. And then we had to read it for like my own personal book club. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to pick this up. I have it on my bookshelf. I'm ready to go. And I was like, oh my God, what is this nonsense? I love this so much.
That's as it should be. That's how we should find books. This is how books should hit us. I just love hearing that. And listeners, I hope you read books like that this year. We'd love to hear about the books that you read and the books that you love. And if you'd like to suggest a book for the podcast, you can become a donor on Patreon. Our Patreon is patreon.com/T as in Tom and as in Nancy Strumpets. And we have a tier where you can donate and pick a book for the podcast. But let's talk about what we're reading next time.
What are we reading next time?
Next time, we are reading A Mistletoe Christmas. It is a Christmas anthology with Eloisa James, Erica Ridley, Christy Caldwell, and Yana McGregor. And I am very much looking forward to discussing all of the fun stories that happen around the revelry next time.
Excellent. Love a good Christmas book.
Yes. So happy holidays to everyone. We will be talking about holidays next time. Thanks so much for listening, and join us next time as we read A Mistletoe Christmas.
And may all your ever afters end happily.